Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. And it's wonderful to have you all join us this morning. Pleased to have Richard Berlin with us today. Richard is the Associate Professor in the practice of Organization and Management at the school, and he's going to be leading today's session. Richard's experience includes a successful track record with self-funded businesses, venture capital businesses, public companies, nonprofit organizations, with expertise and experience in change management, organization development, leadership, and team building. His teaching and research interests really link strategy to organizational change and development, leadership, and team building to optimize performance and drive revenue growth for lasting results. Richard believes in two things. First, every organization must grow to be successful. And second, being able to change both individuals and organization is the only way to make this happen. His passion is helping organizations grow and people develop. And with more than 30 years of business experience and management consulting experience, he's seen a lot of change. Having turned around a business, led a technology startup, led numerous organizational change initiatives, Richard has seen firsthand what to do and what not to do. Change, whether you're driving it or whether it's being forced on you, is never a straight path. And a critical competency is to have resilience. In today's tumultuous and ever-changing environment where change is all around us, learning to build individual resilience is the best way to cope and thrive. And the good news is that resilience can be learned and improved with practice. During this session, during the morning, Richard is going to identify what resilience looks like and doesn't look like. What does it mean? How can it help you? How does it work? And provide some immediate strategies for you to improve your resilience at work and at home. In addition to his work teaching our undergraduates and graduate students, one class which he has to run off to just before 10 this morning, Richard does bring his expertise to our Leading and Inspiring Change course that's coming up in November. So if you are intrigued by this morning's content and want to learn more and to hone your skills, please consider that program. Richard's going to spend our time together exploring how we might build our resilience. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Richard. Please, everybody, put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and we will get to those during the morning session. Richard, over to you.
That's great. Hey, Nicola, thank you so much for that overly generous introduction. And to everybody on the who's on this webinar, good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And really, hats off to you. I think that continuing to learn is really the only secret to really being resilient and obviously for successful change. So I think that's really great of you to join. And let me kick this off this early morning with just a quick snippet from a song that you may recognize. Let me just quickly. So Kelly Clarkson, who you may remember was the American Idol winner in 2002. But anyway, I tend to think that's a nice undercurrent theme for how to be resilient. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And so obviously being resilient and dealing with challenges is so super important. Let me mention a couple things. First, these business over breakfasts are regular at the Goizueta Business School, and welcome. I think the value for you in this session, if you are pretty experienced and very familiar with resilience, it's nice to be reminded about the basics. If this is something that's new for you, it's nice to be introduced to the basics. And by the way, I see a variety of attendees, some old friends, so thank you for joining. So really welcome. I think you'll get a lot out of this. The second thing is please use chat throughout this session on Zoom, because I'll ask a variety of questions and want you to be as involved as possible. And also, raise your hand. And if you have questions, please use the Q&A, grab some coffee, but probably most importantly, have some fun this morning, because you're probably, if anything like me, still waking up. But we're going to do three things in our time today. We're really going to define and understand resilience. We're going to assess your level of resilience, and we're going to identify how to build resilience, which is so important in this just crazy upside down world. So let me ask you this: what does being resilient look like to you? And take a minute, put it in the chat. I want to hear what you have to say or read what you have to say, because we want to make this as engaged as possible. What does being resilient look like? So go ahead, take a minute, put that in chat. We'll see what you say. Yeah, Dana said persevering against all odds. I think that's great. What else does it look like? Let's see, who else? Bouncing back, being steady and calm, adapting with change, bending, not breaking. I like that. Showing up all the time. Yeah, very important. Being able to smile regardless. Gosh, it's such a crazy world. Yeah, thriving after challenge, being present. I think that's great. So now let me ask you a different question. What does not being resilient look like? So I think everything you said, understanding how to move forward, is great. What does it not look like? House of cards. Yeah. Folding, giving up, stressful, overwhelming, being stuck. Yeah. Choosing to give up. Yeah. Playing the victim. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really well stated. I love this cartoon that you'll see. Hey, he appears to have lost all his resilience. I don't know if sometimes that you may feel this way. The end of the day, the end of the week, maybe after some horrific meeting, but resilience is so critical to what we do in this ever-changing world. Now, let me ask you a different question. I asked you earlier what it looks like if you were to answer the question, how would you actually define resilience? What would be a nice textbook definition of resilience? You kind of expressed what it was to when it looks like. So never give up. I think that's good. What else? What is resilience? Adaptability, pushing through, steady and enduring. Yeah, your inner resourcefulness. I like that in the face of difficulty. Well, let me share two definitions that one I think is a little bit more accurate than the other. Bouncing back, I love these. These are also terrific ways of thinking about resilience. Actually, I feel more resilient just listening to this. So some people would define resilience as the ability to be immune to stressors and adversity. It's an innate skill. Well, actually, that's not exactly right. I'm going to share with you a great definition by some folks who recently wrote a study in an international journal for psychological theory, Bonanno, Romero, and Klein. They say that resilience is our ability to withstand, adapt, and learn from adversity. That's very important. They also add, and this is very important too, resilience is not a stable, fixed trait of our personality that we have and always will have. Here's what's really critical. It's dynamic, it's adaptive, malleable, and trainable that allows us both to deal with and learn from stress and adversity. And there's a couple words there that I really want to highlight using the awesome power of my PowerPoint, learn and trainable. And the reason why I say that is a lot of people think, oh my gosh, this is the way it is, but that's not exactly it at all. We can learn to be more resilient. And in fact, I think given how tumultuous these times are, it is a fundamental, necessary thing to do. Let me ask you a different question, not to bring everybody down on this chilly Atlanta Thursday morning, but from your view, what are the top causes of negative stress at work, besides at times everything? What would you say is particularly stressful at work? By the way, Stacey, I like your last comment, learning who you are through challenge and understanding necessary change. Bad boss, poor leadership, lack of support. Yeah, feeling detained, uncertainties. Yeah, feeling like you don't have time, lack of accountability. Is anybody getting stressed just actually reading these words? I'm like unbelievably stressed. Self-imposed pressure. Yeah, we do put so much pressure on ourselves, David, more so than other people. Yeah, supervising others, not having a job, that's actually pretty stressful. So let me share with you some research by an organization called Champion Health. Champion Health, it's out of the UK. They actually are a developer of workplace of health, physical and mental health training. And they surveyed over 2,000 folks last year. And here's what they came up with. So notice number one, and Sabrina just said unbalanced workload. The survey folks who took this said you could actually identify a couple more things, but excessive workload was number one. Lack of control, Someone had mentioned that in the chat. Lack of support, obviously, for maybe peers or senior leadership. Senior staff, that can be very stressful, right? Now, you'll notice 18% other, I think, actually touched on a couple of things that y'all had identified. Poor working conditions, maybe difficult work relationships, work-life balance, organizational culture. Obviously, nepotism can be very challenging, as Darlissa had said, but peers can be challenging, right? Maybe you get along with some, don't get along with others. Oh, Jane, she just drives me crazy, right? That's, can be very stressful. Maybe not enough training. Just a quick sidebar, I do a lot of executive coaching for folks, and recently I was coaching a guy named Doug who works at a technology startup. Actually, they're doing quite well. By the way, I'm in an office that has lights that turn off automatically, so I need to move around a little bit, which actually encourages me to be a little bit more active. I don't know why it's not turning on. Let me just turn that back on. Okay, so anyway, and Doug is doing very well with this organization, but he's really stressed. He's overworked. He's very anxious. And part of it is not only that he's overworked, but he's never had the right training, or the organization never really set him up for success to be successful in his role. It's because insufficient training. Job security these days, that's certainly challenging. Working from home, commuting. Well, here's also what the research indicated, that, and this is really no surprise, right? Across the board, employees experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression remain unbelievably high. Nearly 60% of employees are anxious, and just over half feeling kind of depressed or low in the mood. Now, by the way, who is not depressed or anxious over these last crazy few years, right? Again, why I think it's so smart that you took some time to attend this, brief webinar about resilience. So now let me ask you this: if you're resilient, what are the benefits to you of being resilient? Take a minute in the chat and just respond. What are the benefits to you of being resilient? Never giving up, not feeling stress, yeah. Calm, sense of calm, keep going, happier, yeah. Renew, I think that's exactly right. Thanks for joining. Better work performance, yeah, learning more, relaxed. So, in some ways, as I see your answers, this is now the exact inverse. When you put the answers of what causes stress, I feel better. Hopefully you feel better just even reading some of these things. So here's what the American Psychological Association have identified. People who've been shown to be resilient, happier relationships, less prone to depression. Yeah, see, Rich said more effective. I agree with that. Thanks for joining. Less prone to depression. They're able to handle stress, right? Are more successful in school and jobs, and they live healthier and longer lives. Gosh, hopefully y'all are now calming down and feeling a little bit more resilient just even hearing this. So you're obviously less stressed. And I want to share with you just some quantitative numbers from a survey that looked at really comparing folks in high strain work environments, those people who were very high and resilient versus very low and resilient. Let me share with you this research. So Gary asked, hey, is there a time frame to determine if I'm resilient? It's a great question. Gary, let me mention this. In just a little bit, you'll actually have a survey you can take, a brief one, about your level of resilience. And it certainly kind of comes in and out, probably during the day or the week, but we can talk more about that in just a bit. In this survey, about 2,000 folks were identified by Andrew Shotty, Adam Perlman, Brad Smith, Wendy Lynch, and they noticed the following things. And of course, this just underscores what we just shared. That is, they compared different folks and very high strain environments. They noticed, of course, their scores for stress were lower. Green is resilient, red is not resilient. Likelihood of depression, green resilient, less likely to be depressed. Look at the scores, job satisfaction, a little bit more satisfied at the job. And then finally, much more productive at work. So it looks like Dana asked a question, would you and data support that one is resilient over a period of time, but if prolonged resilience is lowered? Well, actually, I would say this, that you can develop being resilient, and actually over time, your resilience wouldn't be lowered, it would actually be increased because you're sort of reinforcing how to be resilient. I've got a quick piece of trivia question for you from another survey. What percentage of Americans are resilient mentally and emotionally? And let me mention, as you put some answers in the chat, what percentage, 1%, 100%, what would you say? This was done by the Ohio State University. They surveyed more than 3,500 people ages 13 to 73 to understand how people in the US really define resilience. Let's see some good answers here. So again, this is what percentage of people are resilient. I see 35. This was actually before COVID. 15, 25, 62, 35. Let's see. All great numbers. So here's what the research identified, that 83% of the nearly 3,500 people thought that they were resilient. Okay, so here's the real kicker to this survey. Let me ask you this. Of the same people who were surveyed, how many people do you think actually were resilient? Not what they thought they were, but actually were resilient. And for your reference, the authors of the study, and their 50% said Lily, 30, 15, 25, 25. The authors of the study created the survey to not only gauge the perceptions, but also in reality. Yeah, so what I generally see is lower. So, hey, everyone got full credit for this morning. That's exactly right. So only 57%, in fact, scored themselves as resilient. So, hey, they thought they were much more resilient than they were. And I don't know, does anybody here remember a Prairie Home Companion on NPR, Garrison Keillor? In that radio program, he'll identify folks at Lake Wobegon, right, a fictional town in Minnesota. And you may remember the tagline, in Lake Wobegon, all the women are strong, all the men are handsome, and all the children are above average. And so this survey, I think, nicely kind of indicates that we often overestimate how resilient we are. It looks like Jay has a good question, wondering what the level is now. I think that's a good one. It would be interesting to see the effects of the pandemic. Are we more resilient, less resilient? I think in a lot of ways, in some ways, we're a little bit more brittle because so much has changed, but yet at the same time, we really were able to get through some very difficult times. So I want to give you the opportunity to actually determine your own level of resilience. And so what I'm going to do in just a second is share with you an abbreviated version of a questionnaire, the Nicholson-McBride Resilience Questionnaire, that will give you a chance to determine your own level of resilience, at least as of right now. And in a second, when I show you these questions, there's 12 statements. And what I want you to do is rate yourself between 1 and 5, and then add your score. And for your reference, 1, strongly disagree with the statement, 5, strongly agree. So there'll be a little math because you'll have to add up your 12 statements. But go ahead, and now you see the 12 statements on the screen. What I'd like you to do is take each of these, assess yourself 1 to 5, give you a few minutes, I'll stop talking, and then we'll move to the next slide about the results. So go ahead and do that now.
Richard.
Yes.
Dana,
I see.
Dana asked a question, so when you've got some time to answer that, that would be great.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Nicola, thanks so much for the heads up. By the way, folks, when you complete this self-assessment, just send a chat so I can know that you're done. You can just do a thumbs up emoji or just say done or any other quick signal so I can know to move ahead. And while you're finishing those statements, Dana asked, you have data on resilience for race and nationality. Offhand, I don't. For your reference, Dana, the at least the survey that I just indicated was a wide variety of folks, different backgrounds, race, nationality, different ages. but I don't have that offhand. Great question, though. Okay, we'll just give another minute or so. I feel it's actually rude of me to ask you to do some math so early in the morning. Hopefully that wasn't a problem, and it actually will keep you up and more active for the rest of the day. So I do love either the emojis that were done, the flag. Thanks so much for that update. So, hey, let me share with you a little bit about the results of the survey, the self-assessment. So you may have had a developing level of resilience, an established level, strong, exceptional. Give you a chance to read the brief description under the category of how you scored. So let me ask you this. I don't want you to reveal your score, but I'm just curious in the chat, is the score and the description roughly what you would have estimated? You can just say yes or no. Say yes. Generally, yes, 100%. Yes, yes. No? Yeah. So, I want to emphasize, number one, this is an abbreviated assessment. Number two, a quick snapshot in time. What I think is really significant about the assessment are some of the dimensions of the questions that asked you to determine if you were resilient or not. In just a bit, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into how to build resilience. Yeah, no, it looks like Jennifer raised a good question that, hey, maybe I'd answer these differently in my personal life and professionally. By the way, I'm putting together this webinar for today. I reviewed a lot of research, and one thing I didn't share was obviously all the stressors that occur at home, which in some ways are even more stressful than what we see at work. And what's really great about resilience, of course, is the application to every aspect of our lives. Yeah, disagree with the statement, you believe in making your own luck. No such thing as luck. Yeah, no, I like how you say that. I often think actually the harder I work or the more prepared I am, quote, the luckier I am. So I think so much of it is just the level of effort. So let me share with you a short video as we begin to dive a little bit deeper into, well, how do you build resilience, which it really is why y'all signed up for this session to begin with. So I'm going to share with you a short, about 3-minute video from a fellow by the name of Nick Tasler, an organizational psychologist, and he does a lot of work on change. He's going to share an interesting story about an engagement that he was involved with some time ago, which begins to shed light on building individual resilience. And so let me just stop talking and share this video. Hang on just for a second.
In the early 1980s, a really momentous change happened in the telephone industry in the United States. The U.S. government decided we're going to deregulate, demonopolize the phone company, and we're going to allow other competitors to come in. And people working for the phone company, as you can imagine, this was a hugely disruptive change. And fortunately for us, a couple of researchers at the time, a few years before that, had decided that they were going to go in and measure, follow some of these people around and see how they were responding to the prospect of this massively disruptive change before it happened, and then also after the change happened, how did they respond? When the deregulation actually happened, and all of a sudden overnight, the phone company was cut in half in terms of size. Half the people, hundreds of thousands of people laid off. The psychological and physiological toll on the employees was pretty massive. There was heart attacks, kidney failures, strokes, suicides, gambling addictions, alcoholism, in widely disproportionate measures. But it wasn't everyone. And that's what was interesting about it, is there was also another group of people who didn't just survive the change, they actually thrived in the midst of it. If they got laid off, they turned it out to be shooting stars at their new organizations. If they remained at the phone company, then they rose and became important leaders within the new phone company. And so the question, of course, for all of us, particularly for these researchers, is what's the difference? Why did these people perform so much better, deal with it so much better, than these people who were, brought to their knees by the stress? And what they found out is among many other things, even though these people looked the same on paper, they had a very different outlook on the role of stress in our lives, the role of stressful changes. The people who struggled with it had a view of stress that stress is an anomaly, that it only happens to tragic, unfortunate souls. These other people didn't expect stability. In fact, when they looked at life, they assumed that change was going to happen to them throughout the course of their lives, and they're not going to like it all. There's going to be some changes that are not positive, no matter how you want to spin it, but we're going to get through it. And so they saw change, even stressful change, as a perfectly normal part of a healthy, meaningful existence. And so I think the key takeaway for us is, how do you view stress? And then secondly, when this change happens from government regulations, from on high, from our superiors or from other competitors, customers, the question we should be asking is, what do good people do when bad things happen? And that's the most adaptive response to any kind of stressful change that happens to us.
That's great. So I thought that was a useful video to begin to peel back the layers of, hey, what actually does build individual resilience? So I'd like you to take some time and in chat, identify what you believe is really useful to build individual resilience. And you can either make a comment about what you just heard from Nick or just from your own experience. So take a minute and write down in chat what you feel is useful. Let's see, self-confidence, meditating. And while you're putting in some of your answers, I noticed a question from Lily. Do you treat an organization the same as a person when it comes to resilience? Hey, Lily, great question. For your reference, organizations, like individuals, can be resilient too. In fact, you actually want to find an organization that is resilient to work at. In a future session, we can provide some more information about resilient organizations. Anyway, thanks so much for asking that question. Yeah, absorbing the unexpected consequences of your ideas. Yeah, act like you have it if control is illusory. Recognize, invent, reflect, and analyze the solution. Being flexible, exercising, laughing. Gosh, that's so true, Cindy. Incorporating fun. Yeah, your paradigms, how you see the world, obstacle versus opportunity. Rich, I think another great comment. Managing emotions. Yeah, understanding my behaviors and motivators. Tomorrow's another day. These are all great comments. In fact, I'm embarrassed. We all should have been actually teaching the session on resilience. Looking at the big picture, managing challenges, all in caps. Yeah, I think that's great. Finding a solution to overcome what's causing the stress. So again, the value of the session, I think, is one, hey, being introduced to how to build resilience, or if you're experienced like everyone on this call, to be reminded of these basics, because I think it's important to have kind of your North Star with you always to get through these very challenging days. So let me share with you some research, again, from the American Psychological Association. And actually, the research mirrors exactly the things that you're saying. So from their view, they think about building resilience in 4 big categories, right? Resilient thinking, and a lot of you identified that. Building effective relationships, building on strengths, and managing emotions. So very important. And what I thought we'd do as we begin to wind down the session is take a look at each of those. Just want to see some of the other comments in case I miss anything. Yeah, staying within my circle of influence. I think that's a great one. Yeah. Duncan said finding a solution to overcome what's causing the stress, always pretty critical. So let's step back for a second and look at resilient thinking. The first thing that the research indicated is something that you probably would identify. Hey, have an accurate and just a clear understanding of what reality is, right? You know, I often joke that I can be objective about everybody else except myself. And I think the challenge is, hey, what is reality for you, right? And it's often useful to get feedback from other people, ask questions, and really understand, you know, what it is you're facing. And then number two, clarify why you think a situation might be undesirable, right? Well, hey, what's happening here that's bad? Ask yourself, is there any way this could be a good thing? And by the way, we don't mean to be like a Pollyanna or just completely optimistic. The goal is, what is the hidden opportunity? Which I just want to scroll through some of the comments. Somebody had actually mentioned that. I'm just trying to see. Let's see. Well, I can't really, I'm scrolling up. There was, I think it was Rich. Yeah, your paradigms, how you see the world, obstacles versus opportunity. Very important. Put things in perspective. I think that's really critical. You know, it's, I don't know if y'all think about this, but, you know, life has its ups and downs, right? And I think the older and more experienced you are, you realize that, you know, when things are great, well, hey, they don't always last. If things are down, they don't always last, right? So just put it in a larger perspective. Very, very important. Also, as Nick had indicated in the video, accept that change is a natural and unavoidable part of life. Jay, thanks for your comment. I think that's exactly right. The term optimistic realistic, I think that's probably a great way to identify some of the content here, as well as just in general, a good way to be. But it's always changing. In fact, I teach a few classes, as Nicola had indicated, about leading change. And not only is change constant, but it's exponentially changing these days. So it's part of it. Also, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with a book by Carol Dweck, Mindset. Take a growth mindset, right? Think of the larger opportunities. And then, as I think somebody else had mentioned, you know, improvise a solution what you have. I often think when I am dealing with challenges, I immediately think about, okay, what's plan A? What's plan B? What's plan C? What's plan Z? Right? Because there's always different ways to do things. And you don't want to be kind of trapped in your own thinking about how the situation is. And so the next big category, effective relationships, right? And of course, it starts off with develop your people skills, focus on emotional intelligence. And for those who may be unfamiliar with it, it's a great concept. Daniel Goleman recently wrote a book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. And he identifies 5 subcomponents for being emotionally intelligent, right? And actually, again, more powerful than just being purely intelligent. And there's so many different kinds of intelligence. But he says self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills, right? I think the more technologically advanced we are, the easier it is to kind of move away from, you know, emotional intelligence, super critical skills, very important, building relationships, and obviously building resilience. Identify what you need out of the relationships, right? Schedule time to build relationships. And sometimes that, when I share this slide and I talk about scheduling time, it's easy to kind of dismiss that because it seems so formal. Well, the goal is, you know, how do you build relationships? And you need to make some effort to do that, just like you would at work. Appreciate others. You know, when you work, you deal with so many different great people in so many different ways. It's important to kind of step back and appreciate that. It's a positive effort. In fact, being positive, again, going back to what Jay had said, being an optimistic realist. Manage boundaries, right? It's important sometimes to be careful, not maybe some people intruding too much and just having some clear guidelines. And again, in terms of building effective relationships, listen actively. You know, research often talks about how in a conversation, you should try to listen and not speak more than 30% of the time, which is why I'm so grateful that you're providing some responses in chat, because it at least allows me not to monopolize this conversation, which is kind of a challenge when you're doing a webinar. But really important to truly listen, right? I think so many people in a conversation think more about, hey, what am I going to say next, as opposed to, well, what is the person I'm speaking with actually saying, and how to respond to that. So the next big element is building on strengths. And you may think, well, hey, why is that? Let me share with you a quick story. I had a manager one time, a fellow by the name of Steve, who super bright guy. I learned later he actually had a PhD, but Steve had a great Southern accent. And he would always share this story about building on strengths. He would say things like, hey, Richard, you can teach a fish to climb a tree, but a squirrel does it so much easier. And so I really love that story, and Steve was a great manager. And the point is, you want to find what is your secret sauce, right? Identify your natural strengths. I have to share with you, as I think Nicola had mentioned at the beginning of the session, I used to be an attorney. I went to college and law school at the University of Georgia, practiced law for a while. And actually, I never enjoyed law school, never enjoyed being a lawyer. I went to law school to gain those skills, the writing, the thinking, the speaking, because I thought I was sort of naturally creative, a little bit better with people. And I found being a lawyer, it was very hard for me. I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't natural to me. I often joke every time we had a lawsuit, I would say, hey, why don't we just settle this thing? I was really like a fish trying to climb a tree. And so your goal is, hey, what are you naturally good at? Because there's no way you can be successful or even resilient if you're playing to not leveraging your strengths. So you want to nurture a positive view of yourself and your abilities, which actually I was able to do as time progressed, really better identifying what I was naturally good at, right? Take care of yourself. It sounds so corny. People often take better care of their cars than themselves, right? Exercise, eat right. And hey, what are some realistic goals, right? Bill Gates once had said that people overestimate what they can do in a day. They underestimate what they can do in a year, right? So what are your realistic goals? Look for opportunities that promote self-discovery. Earlier in the session, you took that self-awareness questionnaire, and I think that's a great opportunity. You should constantly look for opportunities for either assessments or how you can learn more about yourself. Noel made a comment about a book, Anti-Fragile. I think I'm going to look for that right after this session. It seems like a good read about resiliency. Noel, thanks so much for saying that. And so constantly look for self-discovery. So managing emotions, right? Very, very important. Again, a key element in EQ as well. Keep a journal, right? Research indicates that the more that you regularly journal, the more satisfied you are. And it's oftentimes when you write things down, you realize, oh, hey, wait a minute, maybe things aren't so bad. And it's also a great way to kind of review and consider for the day. Get adequate sleep. Again, very critical, very critical. Reframe. I love this, and learn to savor moments in time. It's very important when you're in a situation to manage your emotions, to kind of step back. And sometimes I will physically step back because I look at things in a different way and reconsider what my approach is. Savoring, very important, whether you savor items in the past, savoring items of what you're doing, or thinking about something in the future, great opportunities to manage your emotions. Find purpose, search for meaning connected to your values. I often think that, when you go to college, you're supposed to choose a major. And I remember thinking when I was in college, oh, that's so hard because it means sort of the rest of my life. Of course, I was over dramatizing that. But your goal is, hey, really, who are you and what's meaningful for you? And that guides you and helps to build resilience because you're more attuned to really what's important to you. Take decisive actions, be proactive. I think it's very important when we're faced with stress and we're trying to develop resilience, is actually, as Jay just put in the chat, right? You want to acknowledge all your emotions. Very, very important. And you want to move ahead. You don't want to be stuck. So even if it's a small step, you want to take some decisive actions. Jay, thanks for your very useful, constantly insightful comments. By the way, someone also said in the session to laugh, and I think that's a great way to do it, not take yourself too seriously. I often say that I take my work seriously, but not myself. And so actually, it's kind of funny to me now that my lights in this office keep moving, kind of clicking on and off. Anyway, uh, great comments in the chat. Let me now share with you just kind of a nice summary. There's an organization in North Carolina that some of you may have heard of, the Center for Creative Leadership. And I really like the way they sort of look at resilience. And of course, it requires the whole self, right? And the purpose is we want to reduce cortisol, the body's stress hormone. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And so when you think about really addressing our own level of resilience and trying to build it up, it's a combination, of course, physical, mental, emotional, and social. All the things that we really mentioned there. I do want to point out the notion of gratitude. That helps, I think, to put things in perspective. You know, when I consider what's happened in Ukraine as an example, um, that does put things in perspective and really helps at least me consider how grateful I am for the life that we live here in the U.S. in so many ways. So I've talked too much. Let me now step back. I want to summarize the conversation we had today. It's been a very quick 45 minutes or so, and then open it up to even more questions if you have some. So we talked about a couple of things, right? The first is resilience is our ability to withstand, adapt, and learn from adversity. And I think the key word, of course, is learn, right? It's a dynamic skill, and we're able to increase it every single day if we choose. Very important. And of course, as you indicated as well, resilient people have happier relationships, less prone to depression, handle stress, more successful in school and jobs, and live healthier and longer lives. Very important. And so what builds individual resilience, right? It's your thinking. It's your mindset. How flexible and adaptable are you? What's the quality of your relationships? Do you focus on what you're really best at? And how well do you manage your emotions? And so as we wind down the session, I want to share with you a final cartoon. I just happen to enjoy this, makes me laugh. Hey, welcome to another one of life's brick walls standing squarely in your path. Select from some of the following options. Go over, under, around, and through. You want to consider when you're faced with a challenge that there are multiple ways to solve this. Let me now conclude by saying thank you. I know how tough it is to listen to these webinars, to do our jobs today, and I really appreciate your involvement. Actually, Amy just mentioned, hey, how much of this is wiring? How much do you think we can control how we think? I think, look, we are wired a certain way, and maybe some of us are more predisposed to anxiety and depression, but there's so much more that we can do to be resilient. And I think a lot should be considered of what we can learn and change. Anyway, I really just wanted to say thank you. I know how hard it is to be in these sessions. If I could be of any help in the future, please reach out. And now let me turn it back to Nicola as we wrap up. And thanks again for taking the time to be on this session.
Thanks, Richard. We do have some additional questions that I don't think you've answered yet. And thank you for this. This is always so such a helpful reminder of what to do and how to think about work and life. Gary asked, how do we move from the denial stage to the acceptance stage?
That's a great question. Gary, thanks for asking that. So I would normally ask more questions to better understand your question. So I don't know if you're referring to helping somebody move from denial to acceptance, or maybe you're thinking about yourself. But generally speaking, I think, let's say you're trying to help somebody else. I think you certainly don't want to say, hey, you need to stop denying things, right? I think you want to lead with empathy. And your goal is to really listen and to recognize that this person is facing a challenge and doesn't really see things as you see it. And so typically people go through a process. And I think you just want to help them and really affirm where they're at. And over time, that actually helps people to move eventually to acceptance. And if by chance, if you notice it's you who are in the stage of denial, I think it's important to kind of, as we mentioned earlier, get a staunch acceptance of what reality is, right? Ask people, try to broaden your thinking, challenge your thinking. I think that's really important. Anyway, hopefully that's a quick little snippet that's helpful.
And I think, Richard, you probably answered Hiranya's question too, is like how do you help someone in your team, your group, your circle who is low on resilience
Yeah,
improve?
yeah, that's a great question, right? You don't want to say, hey, you need to be more resilient, right? That's a little bit off-putting. I think it's trying to understand where they're at, right? Hey, Sally, I noticed you're having a hard day. Tell me a little bit more about that. Why is it hard? What hey, what have you done to try to address that? Is it really as bad as you say? I think there's ways to try to be supportive, right? And maybe even saying, hey, I was in a situation similar, and here's what worked for me. I'm not sure it would work for you. But again, leading with empathy, I think, is the way to provide support for someone who's low in resilience. And there's a lot of resources that are out there that may be useful. So maybe it's a person who might need some counseling and supporting, or even some coaching, and so many great books on resilience. But I would actually encourage that book, Carol Dweck's Mindset. Anyway, hopefully that's somewhat helpful.
Another question for you, Richard, and that is low resilience sort of contagious? I mean, if you don't stop it, if you don't bolster resilience, say within your team, that in fact it can get worse and it can spread from one person to another? Is that correct? Is there any
Nicola, that's a great question. I do think emotions are infectious, right? I tend to think sometimes in the workplace they're another disease that's easily could get out of control. So I think the first thing is you want to recognize, hey, wait a minute, are my folks too fragile, as an example? Well, why is that? What's potentially causing that? Am I somehow a source of that? Am I doing too much for my team? I noticed in the chat a couple of folks have been saying, hey, this is helpful for managing my 13 and 18-year-old. I often think the same. In fact, I often think the traits of a good manager and leader are the same as being a good parent. And I tend to think of, at least if you've got a team of folks who maybe aren't as resilient, your goal is to think, well, wait a minute, am I doing too much? It's important to try to readdress how you delegate, how you encourage action, and do you support when mistakes are made? Very important. Just a couple little tidbits to think about.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for your day. And I know you've got to run to your next session. So I'm going to hand over to Tammy Long to close us out.
Hi, thanks, Nicola, and thank you, Richard. This was a lot of really great information. So really insightful on how to build resilience, not only for ourselves, but for people that we work with and individuals in our family, especially in these challenging days. And I think the last thing that I heard from you that I really felt is very important that we should all take to heart is leading with empathy. So with those individuals that are around us, but remember to lead with empathy for yourself, really be patient for yourself and give yourself some grace, especially in these challenging days. Justin, can you make me a co-host?
Richard,
I'm going to just
stop
share.
sharing. Richard, if you could stop sharing.
No, yeah, sure thing.
Awesome, thank you. So today's session and the next session are actually part of a series for us on thriving in a challenging world. So today's session was talking about or addressed resilience for yourself as an individual. The next session, which will take place on November the 3rd, will be led by Jay Wiseman, Strategic Leadership Superheroes or Superpowers. We're all superheroes and we have superpowers. We will address, or Jay will address, the competencies that propel you to thinking in a VUCA world. So I had to look up what VUCA meant. So if you don't know what it means, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So this is a great follow-up to the session that Richard just provided to us. On November the 17th, rethinking your career journey. So we're really getting into more focus on yourself and your career journey. And then on December the 1st, this will be followed up with building a diverse pipeline of talent. And so we'll be talking about identifying and preparing that pipeline and how do we address that and go about that. And on our last session for 2022, this will take place on December the 15th. This will be our last session, and it will be our year in review. So it will be a panel that will be moderated by Nicola, where we will address the impact on work and lives. So stay tuned for more information about those, but we hope that you're able to join us for, if not all of those sessions, those that pertain to you and information that will be beneficial to you. So my role at Emory's Executive Education as the Director of Open Enrollment, and I just want to share some of our courses that will be coming up that we hope that you will attend. So on November the 9th through the 10th, we have Disrupting Your Business Strategy. So in this session, we'll develop the skills and knowledge to lead a more agile organization and respond to change. So it really is correlating with the information that you're getting from Richard, and we'll get also from Jay. November the 16th and 17th, Leading and Inspiring Change. So if you really enjoyed Richard and the information that he presented today, he is also presenting in this course that's taking place on Leading and Inspiring Change. So if you want to hear more from Richard, we hope that you sign up and attend our Leading and Inspiring Change course on November 16th and 17th. And then last, we have our extended learning courses. These are actually 4-credit MBA courses. You will actually be learning alongside evening and executive MBA students, conducting it in the same manner as they are, with discussions and exams, and you will actually be given a transcript. We have 10 courses that you can select from in various topics, from finance to marketing, accounting, information, and operation management. There is an application that is required for our extended learning courses. The deadline for that is December the 5th. If you have any questions on any of these courses, please feel free to reach out to myself. My email address is tammy.long@emory.edu. So we hope to see you in some of those courses. And again, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning, out of your day to spend with us. We thank you again, Richard. We really appreciate the information that you shared with us.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible again here on November the 3rd for Jay Wiseman's session. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.